How to vectorize any logo in 6 steps. Hey guys, Kerry Hawkins here with another VectorMade.com tutorial video, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to vectorize a logo in 6 easy steps. Now that may seem like a lot of you will probably go, 6 steps, it's just copying a logo. But I'm going to show you all the different ways that you can get this result. And some of these ways will save you a lot of time. I've been vectorizing logos since 2005, so almost 20 years. I have a lot of experience doing this. I've done thousands upon thousands of logo vectorizations, so I have a lot of experience to draw from. So first and foremost is make sure, this is step number 1, make sure that the logo isn't already vectorized somewhere. I know, big deal, right? Because if it's already vectorized, and your client's like, I gotta have this in a vector format, you could just save them a whole lot of time and money, or you could charge them and save yourself a little bit of time. It's up to you. But let's look at this one, for instance. This is Bomber Eyewear, and as you can see, you zoom in, and this is very pixelated. Well, what if we go to their website, and this little guy up here, it's almost always a logo up here in the menu. If you right click on it, you might be able to just click Open Image in New Tab. Let's just see. Oh, looky there. What is this? Then you can right click on this, Save As, and it's an SVG file. And that's already vectorized. You can bring this into Illustrator and it will have vector lines and shapes. So you're done. That's it, right? Super easy. Now, they're not always that easy to find, and sometimes this Open Image in New Tab isn't there because the SVG might actually be embedded in the code. So it's always a good idea to come down here to Inspect, and then this will bring up your developer tools. And this is in any, I'm using Chrome, but this is in any web browser. They all have similar layouts here. It should have similar code when you inspect here, and you can do that on all the different browsers. And so this is showing you that there's an image class here and it's an SVG file. If you wanted to, you could right click on this and open a new tab and it would do the exact same thing that this did here. But just know that sometimes right clicking here doesn't work and coming over into the code will work. There are a few other things. Sometimes this will be in the code itself and you'll need to right click on it and edit as HTML. Then there might be a tag that says bracket SVG, and then a closed bracket SVG, and you'd have to grab that all the way here to wherever the closed bracket is, wherever you would find it. Let's just say it's all the way down there. You would need to copy that and paste it into something like a notepad, and then save that file as an SVG file. I have another tutorial that goes into detail on how to do that, and I will leave a link to that if that's something that you need to do. But just know that's a possibility. Another thing that you can do while you're here is click on the Network tab. It's probably going to be on all. Go ahead and go over to Image. Then you will have to hit Control R, and I think it's Command R on a Mac, to reload everything. That'll reload every image that's used on this page, every single image. Then you can come over here to Type, and you will find, here's SVG right in here. So this is all the SVGs. Now you can see that this BMB logo eyewear is the one that I would want. I right click on it, click Open a New Tab, and there it is. But also this will get you other stuff. So here's an American Express SVG file if you needed that. There's a Discover SVG file here. There's a few others. There was one that was kind of cool in here. Oh, Sezzle logo, full color. Let's see. Yeah, see, that's in there too. And these are all SVG files that you just click Save As, and then put them wherever you need to as an SVG file. So if that doesn't work, you can also try to find these things on other websites. Let's say brandsoftheworld.com. Now, I will say this with a little caveat. This website is a little bit older. You can tell by just the skinny nature of it. Clearly, it was designed about 20 years ago. It hasn't updated since I've been doing this, really. So a lot of the time, you'll find old logos. They may not be as current as the latest one. And let's just try this one. Let's see. We are going to look for, forgot the name of it, Bomber Eyewear, of course. So if we put Bomber Eyewear and we do a search here, you get nothing, right? So if it's not there, it's not there. You can also go to seeklogo.com, and let's just try it here, Bomber Eyewear, and see if anything pops up. And sometimes you get these little pop-ups too, little ads, so you gotta click through that. There's Bomber. Well, you got Bomber or something, speakers, whatever. Nothing here that meets Bomber Eyewear. Again, I don't find these to be the best. This is just if it's not on the website, do check brandsoftheworld.com or Seek Logo or another. There's countless of these out there, and you might find one that you like a little better. I don't tend to use these very often, and I'll show you why real quick. Let me go to let's see, Cuervo. I forget what their website is, so let me look it up. Okay, it's Cuervo.com. Jose Cuervo. So this logo right in here is an SVG, I believe. Yes, and I've grabbed that before for some stuff I've done for liquor stores in the past. So that's an SVG folder file. And over here, if I do a Cuervo search, let me just show you. So you can see these are a little bit older looking. And here's a Cuervo logo. I think this one might be closer, but let's go back and look. See, the R has a little bit of an extra something to it here, and this one doesn't. So this is probably an older rendition of that logo. And that's one of the problems with using Brands of the World or Seek Logo, is that they often have these outdated ones. Let's just see if Cuervo shows up here. Yeah, it's kind of the same stuff. Okay, look, they've got the modern one here, right? They've got it right there, but they've got a bunch of these older ones, although right here, this looks like the new one too. But you have these older ones that aren't quite the same. So just be careful when you use Seek Logo or Brands of the World, because they've got logos that could be 10, 20 years old and they haven't updated them. And I've run into that several times. If that does not work, you can also go to their Facebook page or their Instagram page or wherever and check out their socials. Oftentimes you will find this and you'll say, hey, looky there. I can just copy this and come over to my, where I was. Hold on, not the right program. Photoshop's what I want. Come in here and just see is this a better version? It's slightly better, a little bit different coloring too. See, the reds are a little bit different. It's pretty much the same though. I would say maybe just 5% better. Maybe the eyewear is a little bit better. So you could use that if you wanted to. If you just needed something that was a little bit nicer, you could save this, right click on it and save as. Or you can go through their other photos and see if you can find a better one somewhere. You might be able to find an even, these are kind of scantily clad ladies. Well, hello. I figured it'd be eyewear, not bikinis. But anyway, you can do that and look for a higher quality version to start with. And this will lead us into step number 2. This one's totally optional. It's bumping up the image quality using AI. Now, I like to use Gigapixel AI, currently version 8, but that changes all the time. You can buy this for about $69 right now, and that price also changes all the time. But as far as I can tell, this is worth the money, even if it's higher than that, right? Because I use this all the time. Your results will vary. Some of these, it's not going to work great on. Others, it'll work fantastic on. I use it a lot, though, for image trace stuff. Whenever there's like a tree or something that's ugly, and I'll blow that up, and then I can just live trace that in Illustrator. That's a good way to vectorize. I can also use it to clean up text so that I can take that into a font identification site and more readily identify that font. Sometimes, or just with this, let's just take this Bomber eyewear thing and see what it does. I've already got it set to 6 basic models. I do auto on these usually to start, and then I'll like play with the settings. If you want, you can compare settings here. And I've got a video that goes into this as well, and you can watch that if you want to get some in-depth understanding of how Gigapixel works. But basically, if you just do the autos, you'll usually end up with what you want most of the time. And I've got this selected here, which is like a little slider that shows you here's the before, here's the after. As you can see, these lines really get cleaned up. And if I zoom in, you'll probably see it even better. Let's just zoom in real good. So here's the original, very pixelated, very choppy. And if I come over here, you can see the lines clean up quite a bit. So this can just help you when you're like going in, maybe using your pen tool or whatever in Illustrator. You don't have as much of a fuzzy line to work with. Also, maybe you're like, hey, I recognize that font now that I can kind of see it a little better. With Bomber, obviously, it's not going to be a recognizable font so much as probably something that's custom. But with eyewear, that could be just a font that you could recognize. And so that's just what you use this for. You bring stuff in like this and see what you can get out of it. Let's just see if there's another good logo that we could do. Let me just see what I've worked on lately here. No, flat roof solutions. So here you go. This is what it normally looks like. And if we just do automatic stuff on it, let's see what happens. There you go. It's cleaned up. So if I add the slider in, is the slider there? Come on. There it is. So you can slide back and forth and see that it kind of cleaned up a lot of the text, a lot of the lines. It makes a few mistakes here too. Like, I don't really like the way that it did this, right? That's a little bit goofy. And it adds a little extra line up in here that's not necessary. So that's where you can come in here and mess with your settings. Maybe you do some more denoise or fix the compression. See if that corrects that. Yeah, see, look, I got rid of that line. So you can do that. You can try these different settings over here: high fidelity, low res, text and shapes, etc. Let's just try text and shapes. I'm curious, since there is quite a bit of text action happening on this one. And there you have it. I don't really like it because it caught some of this drop shadow, which I would probably get rid of if I were vectorizing. But it did a better job on this little shadow here for FRS. So as you can see, you have to play with these things a little bit and experiment with them. But that's what I use it for: enhancing things, making it to where the lines are a little more crisp. Maybe I can redraw them a little easier if I see a straight line versus like one that's fuzzy. And sometimes the font identification places that you can use will have an easier time of identifying these fonts if they're enhanced, which leads me to step number 3: identify and or find fonts. So the best place usually that I go to get the absolute best results on font identification is defont.com. You come over to their forum, click on font identification. You have to have an account. You would click new topic, upload an image, and then when you do, you just want to make sure that you have this little notify me of replies via email checked so that you know when they've sent something that gives you an answer. I do this a lot, probably 2 or 3 times a week, maybe more on a busier week when I can't figure it out myself. And the only downside with using this is that they don't always know what font it is, and then you're not going to find out for maybe a day, maybe longer, sometimes shorter. It just depends. Like you're not really sure. So if like your turnaround time is really quick, you're probably not going to get this back in time to be able to use it, unless it's just a really common font that they can find quickly for you. But if it's that common, you can probably find it yourself, which leads me to the other option, which is whatthefont.com, or it's really myfonts.com/pages/whatthefont, but you can put in whatthefont and that will get your result. And this is basically just an AI identifier. You would just bring your folder, your file in here, and it will identify the fonts for you. Now, I don't think Bomber is going to show up at all, so I would just skip that one. But maybe Eyewear, although this is pretty doubtful too, just because it's so tiny. But let's just click on Identify Font and see what comes up. Now, obviously, it's getting some pretty ridiculous results. This one's probably the closest one so far. Maybe this one here, but most of these are not very good. And that happens a lot too, especially with smaller images. You're not going to get the best results because the details are they're really tiny. Let's just see real quick. This is another one I like to use, Font Squirrel. I've noticed that between What the Font and Font Squirrel, I can get some really different results. So if I don't like what I'm getting on one, I'll go to the other. So you go to their font identifier, upload an image. Let's just try the same one, see how that goes. And we'll click and drag this little thing down to here, see what this does, maturate it. And it will have these three selected by default. You can also add my fonts if you want to. You sometimes have to come in here and tell it what this is. If it just doesn't, ooh, that's W-E-A-R. So we'll do that and then maturate it and see what it comes up with. See, a little bit different fonts. These also will tell you if they're free or not, but I'll touch base on that in just a sec. So maybe this one here is the closest. There's just not a lot that really matches very well. And in this case, I would probably just figure out, you know, hey, this looks like impact that's been italicized a little bit, slanted, and is probably a little bit widened. So it's probably 110, 120%, something like that. But it definitely looks like impact. And it would probably work well enough. And if not, you could just type in impact and then go in and adjust it as needed too. So the other place you might try is fonts.adobe.com. Up here at the search, they've got a little icon here of a camera. You can click on your image. It will scan through and it will take a look as well. And you just do the same thing that you would do on any of these others. Just drag around whichever font it is that you're looking for. That's right, it's eyewear. And again, it gives you very different results. These are actually terrible this time around, but you never know. You see this Field Gothic actually looks pretty close. Maybe this Montstella Heavy Italic, you know, that's the closest looking one so far that I've seen. And yet none of these are exact. I would still go with impact, just from my experience. But those are 3 examples of sites you can use. There are other ones out there. These are the best ones I've found for the money, and they are a little bit different each time, so you get a little bit different understanding of what font it is. One of them might be a little bit better than the other one time, and the next time it's worse. So just use these different resources because they have different pools of fonts that they're pulling from, right? They're not all looking at the same fonts. They don't have the same library of fonts, even though there's thousands and thousands on each one of these sites. And then once identified, you know, I recommend that you search like for a free version of that font, because most of the time it's going to be out there somewhere. You'll be able to find a free version of, you know, raster, expanded, black, italic, or whatever. In this case, you just add it because it's an Adobe font. You have to have an Adobe account, but hopefully if you're watching this video, you already do. And if it's not there, if you can't find it for free, there are certain fonts that are very hard to find. They're very modern. Haven't been around for very long, and somebody else is, you know, wanting to make money off of those fonts, and totally understandable. But for your purposes, you're not needing the font to recreate a whole bunch of other new things, right? So if you are, pay for the font. If you're just doing it to recreate something that's already been created, right? They've already used that font to make this logo in the first place. Then you want to just kind of try to find an image of that font. And what I like to do, let's go back to what the font. This is a great way to do it. Just bump this slider up when you get your results and you find the font that you like. Let's just say it was High Swift. It's not, but let's say it is. Bump this up as far as it'll go, 160. Right click on that, open image in new tab. And here you go. You've got a transparent background image that's this big. And now you can just draw that with your pen tool by hand, or you can do an image trace if it looks right. And so you would just save that image as, put it somewhere, and use this now to vectorize the font, even if you can't find it for free. Step number 4, recreate the shapes. So you can do this in a few different ways. First, let's talk about image trace. This is the easiest setting, but also the worst results, and I'll show you why. Let's just drag one of these over, and I'll click on image trace, and let's do 3 colors, because there would be white, black, and red. And I'll show you what this looks like. That's atrocious. Now you can open up your image trace dialog and do some settings here, and you know, try to like improve on this a little bit, maybe fewer corners or more, or, you know, less noise or whatever. But like, it's not gonna look good. Most things are not gonna look good live traced. I will show you some examples of things that are. Let's say if eyewear, we had identified that as like a really grungy font, right? Instead of this kind of nice sans serif block font. Let's say it was this up here. And I already, using the method I showed you in step number 3, I saved this file from myfonts.com. I don't even remember the name of this, but let's just say eyewear was like this, and look at all this stuff. You wouldn't want to like vectorize this by hand, right? And you don't want to buy the full font either. So you can just bring this image into Illustrator, and we could do an image trace, but let's just do a sketched art. I like sketched art for most things that are black and white, by the way. It's a pretty good setting. Sometimes silhouettes. Sketched art works really well. So let's just do that, see what it does. It will take a little bit of time. And of course, there are some missing pieces, but overall that looks really cool. I would come in and drop the noise down to 1 pixel and might even up this to like 90 or something. See what that looks like and watch it update. So get a little bit more detail that way, a few more of these holes, whatever. That looks pretty good. You would then click and expand on this to get the vector. So now you can see it's all vector lines and shapes. That was outline view, by the way. So you go view, outline, or control, command Y. And I'll just slip this down here. Again, that's what we would do if this were eyewear in this little funky font. You'd come down here, place it down there, and you'd move on, right? So that's what image trace is good for. Stuff that's grungy, things that have lots of detail, but the detail is not necessarily important. Like a good example would be a silhouette of a tree, right? A vector black silhouette of a tree. It's got all those leaves and branches everywhere and holes in it. And you know what? Nobody's going to know if you got that leaf just right or not, most of the time, unless it's a very specific tree with a very specific shape, something crazy like that. But most of the time you can get away with it with lots of detail and just really grunginess and paintbrush strokes and stuff like that. But anything that looks like this logo, where there's clearly a spherical shape here and clear lines, you're just going to want to do this by hand. And your best thing is the pen tool. Okay, you're going to use this. You also might use some shape tools right here. So you've got rectangles, ellipses, etc. But for the most part, the pen tool. And so if you click on this and you just start going, if you hold shift, that'll send you in a straight line or a 45-degree angle. So either 90 degrees, 0, or 45. It'll lock in. So you'll do that here. And then if I click and hold down the left mouse button, this will give me sliders. And so this gives you a how it's going to ease into the next point. And so there is this curve. So I want a little bit of a slider here, a little handle. And I'll come to this point. And you know what? This bomb here in the middle actually cuts out of this piece and that piece. So you could stop here and then do that, but I want this outermost edge to be like perfect with the shape that I'm going to make here. So I'm actually going to create the B as though it were complete. I'm going to do something like this right in here. And again, I'm clicking and dragging the left mouse to create these little handles. And if you want, you can hit Shift X to switch over to stroke instead of fill, or you can click this little button over here to do the same thing. And if you need to, if you go to where your stroke is, you can find the weight here. You can even bump that down, let's say 0.25 if you need to see better. And since I'm already working with black, you might come in here to your color and like change it to maybe red or magenta or something. Let's do magenta so it shows up. And so then anyway, here I am at this anchor point. If I click back on it, I'm going to reset this handle. So it disappeared, right? It was kind of nice and perfect, but now it's disappeared. And that's cool because it gives you the opportunity to redo this half if you want. So say you like where this is, you can come back here and click on that to get rid of the handle. And now it's like starting at a fresh point all over again. So I might come in something like this. Click there. Again, this is going to be hidden and cut out, so I don't really care how pretty this looks right here. And then this looks like it kind of maybe comes down just a tiny bit. And then you'd probably have your curve somewhere over here. And then this comes down to maybe here. Again, I'm just kind of clicking and dragging these lines to create this. You can always come back later with your this selection tool right here, the direct selection tool A, hotkey A. And you can adjust these handles independently, right? So if you don't like the way it looks, come back in and adjust this, and it will look better, right? So that's the best way to do that. And then you come back to your pen tool, click on here. That will get rid of this handle again, but that's okay. We're just going to hold shift, click over here. I'm going to click up to this, hold shift to get a straight line. Now here, I would usually just finish the shape all the way down. And I'll show you why, because I want this line to match. And it's really hard to like click here and then click out somewhere else and then come back in and click this on the exact same slant of a line. So I usually do things like this, and then maybe do something like this to finish this out. This looks like a little bit of a curve here. And then I might just adjust this ever so slightly, something along those lines. So I've made that shape, right? That's usually what I'll do, something like this. And I'm happy with that. And then what I'll do is I'm gonna grab my rectangle tool and I'm gonna create the bridge here. Now what you'll notice is the only difference is that this has curves to it and mine's not gonna have any curves. Now I'm gonna select both of these. So I'm just shift clicking to get both shapes now, because I've got one shape and a little square. And I'm gonna come to my Pathfinder and I'm gonna select this first option, which will meld the two together. So if I click on that, you'll see now they're just one shape. And I will get my direct selection tool out and I'm gonna get these little corners, and you'll see this little circle. When you select this and you click on that circle, you should get this little curved line. If you click and hold and drag, you can curve that like so. Now, if they all need to be curved to the same extent, you can just grab them all together, like by shift clicking, and they will curve together. But as we can see, this one here has a little bit more severe of a curve than this bottom one here, right? And this one looks like it has no curve. And this one maybe, I'm not sure if it has a curve or not. Let's leave it off for now. I don't think it really does. I'm gonna look at the original again. Yeah, I would say no curve on that. Something like that. And maybe a little bit more of a curve here. Let's meet these two in the middle. Yeah, I think I would do that. Maybe less of a curve here and more of a curve on here. Because remember, this is pixelated, so it doesn't look quite right. So you're just having to kind of guess as to what it really should look like. But that's what I would do, just like that. Again, Shift X to go between stroke mode and fill mode, so I can see where my original was behind it. That looks really good. Now, if I'm gonna do this, I might take the ellipse tool. It's a slanted ellipse, so it's not gonna be a perfect up and down circle like this. And let me just hit D to get a default fill of white and a default stroke of black. I'm going to go ahead and remove this white fill. You can select it here and press this. You can also hit backslash, and that's a hotkey to get rid of that. But anyway, that's about what that shape looks like if it weren't slanted, right? Maybe a little bit shorter, somewhere in there. So what I want to do is get it to be slanted though. So what I might try is see if I can right click on this, transform, shear. I'll move this out of the way, make sure preview is selected. And I might just see if I can shift this ever so slightly on a horizontal. I don't really like the way that's looking though. It's okay. Let me try just a little bit and then extend it out a little more. And then maybe just mess with it. So that looks pretty good right there. I'd say that's in the money, right? That's good enough, right? And who knows what the original exactly looks like, but that's pretty stinking close. And that'll get you a nice perfect sphere without having to draw that by hand, because we all know nobody draws perfect spheres by hand, at least very few. And then I would probably come and do the pen tool again to get this part. Maybe click up here, click across, holding shift, click down here, and anchor the points together like that. Then you want to select both with shift clicking, come down to shapes mode, and weld those two together. Again, if I hit Control X, you will see that, yep, there's that one shape. I might leave it black too, just so it shows up on the red. Then to create this, I'm gonna get my pen tool again. I'm gonna start below, so there is probably not a gap there. It looks like maybe, but that could just be the red pixels at the edge kind of looking pink. So I would leave no edge, and if I did, it would be like a really thin white edge right here. That's kind of dealer's choice there. I'd probably do no edge. And I would just start here and maybe come up to about here and shift click over here. So I'm creating a nice straight line. Let's make this an easier color to see for now. So you can see it's a big straight line, but I'm gonna click with A, again, my direct select tool on that corner. And then I'm gonna click on this to drag this here to get that curve. And then I'm gonna come into where my stroke is and I'll bump this up a little bit, maybe to 3. I might, maybe 2.75. No, I think 3 is fine. I would do 3. Then if you don't really want to leave these strokes as they are unless you're still toying with them, but for a finished product, you want to like expand those. So you'd go Object, Expand, and just make sure Fill Stroke is selected. And now it's a shape instead of a stroke, right? And then for this little shape here, we'd probably do something. It's supposed to look like a flame, so it needs to have like a nice flame top to it, a little kind of like a flaming tongue, a lick, you know, at the top there. So you got these little curves that probably aren't showing up very well in this original. So I would add a little bit of curve here. Again, just clicking and dragging to see where these little handles show up. And then, of course, you can come in and manipulate them after you're done to try to get them to look even better if you need to. I would probably do something around this. This looks fine. You know, it's ill-defined, hard to see. If you want to match a color, by the way, so you know that this is red, it's going to be the same red. Have it selected and press I, which gives you an eyedropper tool, which is also over here, by the way. You would click on that, and that will get you some color that's close. Now, if you were going to do this in CMYK versus RGB, you would need to make sure that you came to color mode and change that. So File, Document Color Mode, hit CMYK. That's going to look different, right? You're going to get different values up here, so let's click on it again and see what we get. Totally different values, right? So it looks a little bit faded to me. So manually, you might have to just say, you know, I know this is red. I'm going to just make it solid red, which is 100 magenta, 100 yellow. That's kind of your standard. And let's just color this the same. I'm going to bring that to the front, which is Control Shift right bracket or Command Shift right bracket on a Mac. That if you do Command Shift or Control Shift left bracket, that's all the way to the back. Right bracket's all the way to the front. If you just do Command or Control left bracket, right bracket, it's one step, right? So if you have 100 items out here on your artboard, it's just going to go from 100 to 99, 98, 97, etc. So that's a way to get some control. See, I'm doing it one step at a time. You can see it go behind the wick, then it's going to go above the wick. But that'll save you a lot of time when you're reordering all of your pieces after you've drawn them out. This one would need to be black. I like 100 black for most things that are black if you're doing CMYK. We would also do the same thing with this one over here and keep it black. If you wanted a rich black, you can do 30, 30, 30. You can also do 70, 50, 30, like that. Sometimes this is going to be too much, depending on the porosity of the paper that something might be printed on. And if you're doing RGB, just, you know, it doesn't really matter. RGB is going to look great with any of these blacks, and just go with the standard black. You don't have to worry about it. But if you're worrying about printing these, which a lot of the time when I'm vectorizing, I'm doing it for the purpose of blowing it up so that it gets printed, I need everything to look good in CMYK versus RGB. So let's just say we were going to go with a really dark black on this one to make sure it popped really nicely. And I want to be able to see where this white line is and cut it out. So let me just select this, and I'll go Object, Path, Offset Path, and I'm going to kind of guess at what this would be. Let's say 0.06, 0.05, 0.04. I'm just going to go until I bet 0.03 is it. Yep, 0.02 is a little bit too small. 0.025, maybe 0.025, 0.03, 0.027, somewhere in there. It doesn't matter if it's what the setting is here when it's round, but you know, you might need to change this to round if you're dealing with something that's got a square edge to it, but the border around it is round. If not, just leave it on miter. And then make sure preview's on, hit OK. I'm going to go ahead and change the color of this to yellow so I can see it. And if you're going to take this out of the shape, you want to select these and then select the part that you're cutting out. So this is what I have selected right now. Come over to Pathfinder, and there's usually a few options. Sometimes this one will work, but if you've got multiple pieces, it usually won't. So I typically do something maybe like this. Let's see if that one works. Nah, that's not as good. Let me try this one. Yeah, I like that. So this will cut out the top layer from the bottom layers. You can also do this Pathfinder down here, but that will create intersection pieces, whereas this one just laid it flat and cut it flat out, so you only have to delete this piece. There's usually, like, if there's an enclosed space like here, there's going to be an invisible piece here too, like this. What I would do, because this does not have a fill or stroke, is I would select this and go select same fill and stroke, and it will catch every invisible shape. Because whenever you mess with Pathfinder, it always creates these invisible shapes. And so you might go back and say, oh, that looks really good, and then select this guy and change the color to black and go, what? Why is this filling in? And you can just use your direct selection tool to delete those, or you can remember what I did and select everything that is fillless and strokeless, and then just delete them there, and just make sure it's not like also a clipping mask or something else that you're using. So that's how I would finish out this entire logo. Do it by hand like this. I'd probably come in here and do eyewear in impact. I'd probably slant that. So maybe that would look like, let's see, let's just real quick see how we would get impact to look here. Because so as you can see, it's much wider. We'll drop this down so we can see it a little bit better. I'm gonna go over to my character tools here and probably increase the width of this just a little bit. Maybe about right there, 160. I'm going to increase the distance between the letters a little bit like this. I'm going to bring down the height just a little like that, down to 74. I'm going to right click on it, transform, and go shear, and bring that to about 20, maybe 21. I'm going to readjust this a little bit, increase that size just a little bit more to 160, bring it back in to 26 on my spacing here, and that's what I would do. And if you need to convert this to outlines, it's a font right now, so that means you can edit it and change it. But if you need to create outlines out of this, you would select it and hit Control-Shift-O or Command-Shift-O, and that will convert that to outlines. So now it is just vector shapes. You can no longer edit that as text. So that's probably what I would do for this instance, because this is so hard to read. There's no telling what font that is, and this is close enough. So step number 5, I've already kind of touched on a little bit, but that is using color to your advantage when you're vectorizing these. If it's RGB versus CMYK. Now, if it's RGB, you probably were supplied with a file that was already in an RGB format. So you can, let me just go back to where I was in RGB mode. You could just take this once it's all drawn out, right? Let's just assume you had everything. You could just grab this stuff, get your little eyedropper tool or hit I, hotkey I, and grab all the colors off of that and just use those. So in this case, I'm getting 15, 14, 14 for RGB. Honestly, I would drag that down to 0, 0, 0, but that's because I know this needs to just be black. But you don't always know what color they were using originally, and it's not always apparent from the images that you're provided, and that's all the information you may have. For this red, let's just see what this would end up being. If I click on it, it's 237, 28, 36, changes it to 234, 31, 41, whatever. It's all fine. But that would be for RGB mode, right? So this is going to be if you're using it for monitors, TVs, anything that's electronic, your website. But if it's CMYK, you need to make sure to adjust the colors, okay? So most of the time when you get an RGB file, it's a much bigger color gamut than CMYK. And if you're converting it to CMYK, you're going to have a difficult time printing those colors where they look terribly accurate, right? Sometimes reds are going to have a little bit of cyan in them, and you don't want that usually. So let me just switch back over to CMYK. In this case, this is like a very pink looking CMYK red. So as you can see, it's got a little bit of cyan, mostly magenta, and then a little bit of yellow. What I would do if I were recreating this, I would just drop out the cyan, probably bump up the red to, or the magenta 100. And I would probably also bump this up to 100 as well. You might try 90 if you need it to look a little bit less warm, but this is your standard red. And then I would cut this out too. Another thing you want to do is just kind of get rid of the percentages that are in decimals. You know, try to make things like nice even numbers. It's easier to remember, and it will help out the printers too, because they don't want to print things that are in 0.84, 0.74, you know, that kind of junk. That's just not very helpful for a printer on their end. If you're printing with blue, especially when it's in an RGB file that's been provided to you and it's blue, it's almost always going to print purple if you just use the eyedropper. So rule of thumb, and I've made videos about this too, with blue, do 100, 70, 00 to start, or maybe 75, 170, 175. You want mostly cyan, a little bit more magenta, and none of the rest. And then if you need it darker, just adjust the black. So here's where you get a dark blue. Again, you might go as high as 75, but when you start getting into 80, you're going to start looking purple. So you don't want it to be purple. If you do 100, 100 like that, that's going to print purple. I promise you this looks like blue on your screen, and an RGB is not on my screen right now. But on many screens, this will look blue, especially if it's in RGB mode, and it will print purple. So I'm trying to save you some money. I've had thousands of dollars of mistakes from this color right here. So make sure you get that down to 75, 70, and if you need it darker, add 25, see how that goes. And if that fixes it, great. If not, adjust it to 50, whatever, you know. Eyeball it a little bit, but just know that you gotta adjust these colors if you're gonna do CMYK. And that leads me to our final step, step 6, which is save the file to the various formats, okay? So for most of my customers, I usually will save the Illustrator file, and I will save them a PDF file as well and send that to them. So they'll get an Illustrator working file and a PDF file. And then certain printers may still require that you save as an EPS, which is kind of like a vector format that can be used in lots of different programs. Like Illustrator files can't be used by all programs, but EPS usually can. Sometimes PDF can too. It just depends, right? And I run into this all the time. Various printers, they may have more knowledge than others. They may have older equipment, older computers. So there's all sorts of different formats that work best. If you're not sure, ask your printer. Ask the company that you're making this for. Or just make them all the different formats so you don't have to worry about it, right? And then other formats that you might need would be like SVG, which is a vector, but that's primarily for website use. There's also PNG, WebP, and JPEG. Those are all going to be raster images, but they might be useful for websites as well. And if you needed to do that, let's just say we were done with this and we wanted to export. Obviously, you can go to Save As and choose an Illustrator file, PDF, or EPS, or SVG. But you can also save time by saving as an export for screens or export as. I usually just do export for screens. This will give you the artboard that you have selected. You would maybe title it something, you know, bomber, whatever. And then this is where you maybe add various scales or formats. So it'll usually populate one of these. A lot of times I give a 1x and maybe like a 4x, just so my client has like a normal size and like a really big size. And then maybe do a JPEG here, JPEG 100. This is quality 180, 50, 20. So JPEG 100 would be the highest quality. And then maybe you can do SVG in here as well. And you can do PDF in here. You can do WebP in here. And it will basically just create folders with all of these different files in there, and they will be partitioned out by format so that you know that, oh, this is my PNG folder and my JPEG folder and my SVG folder. And then you can just save that file folder and give that to somebody, right? So let me just export this out real quick and I'll kind of show you what I mean. So there they are. Let's see if we were to go. You've got this PDF, JPEG, PNG, SVG, whatever. All these right here, you could just send that to a compressed zip folder. And then you've got a nice little packaged logo files. You know, and maybe add your Illustrator and PDF to that if you didn't export here. So they have every format, and then you can send that on to the client. And that's what I do in a nutshell to vectorize any logo out there. I hope that that was helpful to you guys. I've got all the other videos. I'll leave descriptions in the description, or I'll leave links in the description below, and you guys can follow those if you need further detail in any one of those. And I will see you guys in the next video.